Good evening. Welcome to Taking Stock, the looking past COVID edition and trying desperately to see a future for tourism in South Africa. Before the lockdown, we had nearly 9% of GDP coming from tourism. It employed 1.5 million people and was a growing industry with huge potential. But in recent years, South Africa has shot itself in the foot so badly with tourism. First was the big issue around visas, and we made it deliberately difficult for people to come to South Africa and lost thousands of visitors and goodwill there. And then the Cape Town water crisis didn't help either for the 2018-2019 season, because as a long-haul destination, people tend to book a long time in advance. Well, to have a look at a COVID-19 scenario in terms of what's going on with tourism, we'll be joined by Elmar Conradie, who is the Chief Executive of FlySafair, one of the few domestic airlines currently flying. We'll also talk to Tim Cordon. Tim is the Senior Vice President for Europe and the Middle East for Africa, also at the Radisson Hotel Group, and wrap it all up with Leanne Back, who is at BDO. She is a specialist in tourism and hospitality. Well, when FlySafair resumed flights just a couple of weeks ago, they did so with a bang, something like 22 flights a day, way down, about a quarter of their usual volume of flights. There just weren't enough passengers, not enough people confident to fly, and perhaps just not enough business activity to warrant it. Elmar Conradie is the Chief Executive of FlySafair. Have you managed to maintain that level of frequency, Elmar?
No, Bruce. Unfortunately, there was a period where we noticed the load factors were just too low. So we cut back down to about 14 flights for a period of about 2 weeks. And then we reintroduced more flights again when they opened PE. And we've increased some frequency again on Cape Town and Durban. So we're now back again to where we started. We're back to sort of 20 to 22 flights a day.
And I mean, it's only a fraction of what you were doing before this crisis. And I think it's indicative of the fact that there's zero leisure travel. It's only business travel. It's only business travel with permits under stage 3 lockdown. So there's a huge number of hoops to jump through for people to fly, which is almost a disincentive, or not, for you.
Yeah, there's a few other reasons why people can fly. And we've made it as easy as possible for people to create the permits or understand what they need to fly on our website. But it is a huge disincentive. So people don't want to jump through the hoops and go through the rigmarole of getting ready to fly. I think once you're at the airport, the experience are actually quite pleasant because there's so little people in the airport. I mean, to give you an idea, for the second quarter of this year, the whole airport network only flew 0.4% of the passengers that flew in the same period last year. So that also gives you an idea of the impact on revenue and the impact on the aviation industry as in general, because it's not just the airlines. Often people think when you talk about aviation, so the impact is on FlySafair and on Mango and on Comair, but the impact goes much further than that. It's the airport companies, it's tourism in general, hotels, all the bed and breakfast, restaurants, coffee shops, the little shop at the coastal town that normally makes a killing in the holidays, and now all of those people don't have the revenue that they normally have.
The knock-on effects are absolutely petrifying. They really are. I mean, can you sustain the business of FlySafair for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, in perpetuity at current levels?
So Bruce, it's a difficult question to answer. I mean, the way we're running at the moment, we can still operate for at least another 3 to 4 months. The issue though, and I think this is a problem that many businesses face at this stage, is once you actually start making up. So you say, well, you're actually flying. It's not just about operating profitably and making money again. You have to make up all these lost months of revenue and losses. So once we actually get to a point where they maybe open the skies and there's more traffic and more passengers, the battle, that's actually just the beginning of the battle for us. So I think we'll make it to the next round, if I can put it to you like that, where we actually can start flying again and we can try and get ourselves out of the hole that we're in.
Because, I mean, since you went into lockdown, of course, BA has stopped flying. Comair is not flying, so neither Kulula nor the BA flights under the Comair brand are flying. SAA is not flying, but Mango is. Your payloads seem to be quite full, though. I mean, on the number of flights that you have launched, in the beginning, there was a trickle of people. I'm told that the flights are fairly full at the moment. So you are at least covering the costs on the individual flights. You're able to make a turn on those flights. Are you charging what you were charging before lockdown, or has there been an increase in pricing?
It's actually reduced. So our ticket prices are actually lower than what it was before lockdown. Because people are reluctant to fly, and to try and stimulate the demand and make sure that you can get an aeroplane full, we had to actually reduce our prices. We have some flights that are full. If you look overall at the whole network, there's many flights where we fly with 40% load factors on a day, sometimes even lower at 30% load factors. And those flights that are a little bit fuller subsidize the flights that are less full.
Well, what's happening to pilot crews, to flight attendants? What's happening to the booking staff? What is happening to the ground staff? All of these people who are required in order to make the system run. Are you operating at 15, 20% staff capacity? Are people sitting at home hoping for a call that maybe there'll be a flight for them in a week or two?
Yeah, so on the actual operating crew, so the cockpit crew and the cabin crew, we're only utilizing about 30% of our staff at this stage. We are planning to increase that over the next month or so, just to make sure that everybody stays current with their licenses and they get back into the whole training routine that we've got, where they have to be trained every 6 months.
Are you even looking that far ahead, or you're so busy playing fireman, putting out fires wherever you go that you can't possibly think 6, 12 months ahead? I suppose you have to.
Bruce, I guess the biggest challenge that we've got, and I think many businesses, is when is post-COVID. At this stage, we're not. Unfortunately, aviation is in a terrible situation together with hotels, where we are probably one of the few industries that are actually still in a semi-lockdown. We're only allowed to fly business travelers. We're only allowed to fly to certain airports. So, at this stage, we're actually still trying to get out of lockdown. A lot of people, a lot of businesses have already forgotten about what it was to be in lockdown. We are pretty much still in lockdown. If we just look at the numbers that we're operating, we would love to get back to a situation where we back to 60 or 70% of what we used to fly. Because then we can actually start thinking, okay, listen, we've survived COVID. So we still I think a lot of people talk about these sort of three phases of this crisis. First, survive, then recover, and then thrive. We definitely full-blown still in trying to survive the COVID pandemic.
Elmar Conradie, sobering chat. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening on Taking Stock. Elmar did mention that the hotel industry is also facing huge pressure. We'll pick up with the Radisson Group in just a moment. Well, that was the horror story out of the airline industry. I wonder how hotels are coping. Well, Tim Cordon joins us from Dubai on Taking Stock this evening. He is the Senior Vice President for the Middle East and Africa for the Radisson Hotel Group. Big expansion in the last decade and a half or so across this region, Tim. And suddenly, has everything gone into lockdown?
Well, more or less, like any hotel company, we've been incredibly impacted by the effects of this pandemic. I mean, there really is no precedent for the dimension of this crisis, and travel and tourism has been impacted probably more than most. So yes, it's fair to say that we've had some very difficult times, but we're beginning to see some light at the end of the tunnel. Small baby steps. I don't want to be too positive yet, but things are beginning to get a little bit better.
Where are you seeing opening up of economies happening most actively? I want to say aggressively, but it feels like the wrong term at this, where we are in the world right now. Which countries are being the most courageous in opening up?
Well, in the Middle East and Africa, at least, there are a few economies opening up. Dubai, for example, opened 2 days ago on the 7th of July for international tourists. So everybody's watching with bated breath, really, to see what the demand is from international tourism coming into a city like Dubai. So far, we've seen around a 10% uptick in reservations. Which was pleasing.
And how do you flex? How do you remain sufficiently flexible to be able to accommodate people if demand comes, but at the same time not have too many people on standby to work who are not working, and keeping your cost base so terribly high?
That's exactly the right question to ask. It's not easy. We put in a number of different measures to make sure that the costs are flexing with the amount of business that we have. I don't think anyone expects now that we're going to have a huge upswing in business. It's going to be gradual. It's going to come back a little bit at a time. And I think the recovery now starts with the word confidence. And if people are confident to return, and we're offering something for them that is safe and secure, and they can be definitely confident they're not going to be infected during their journey, then I think that's going to help increase demand, and that's going to be the key to unlocking travel globally over the coming months or so. And we at Radisson Hotel Group have done a lot of work in respect of that. We've had some epidemiologists, and we've partnered with a firm called SGS to make sure that our protocols in our hotels are absolutely right, to make sure that there's no spread of the virus, and we can assure our guests a safe experience when they come to stay with us.
Holiday makers and business travel, of course, are your bread and butter, but there's also the global conferencing industry, which is huge, or has been huge in Dubai, certainly big in South Africa, and you've got great properties in South Africa which get used for conferencing and lots of facilities there. And that's also that heart attack that happened in the economies just caused a sudden stop to that. I mean, everything stopped, didn't it? Is there any sign that those are going to start starting anytime soon?
I mean, very small. Baby steps, let's say. Some of the economies that we look after are allowing meetings up to 25 people or 50 people. But part of those protocols we put in was to say we need to allow social distancing. So we've had to look at the spaces that we offer for meetings and events, and a room that perhaps previously we would have been happy to have 200 people in is now a room that we can only have 75 people in. So we've adapted our processes to make sure that people are safe. But the thing about hospitality is it hasn't changed fundamentally. What we're offering to the guest is an adaptation to make sure that they stay safe. And that's critical to them. Our Google search results show us that safety is the most searched word around travel at the moment. But our reviews show us that the most appreciated thing is still service. So we need to make sure we give guests a memorable experience, something they can enjoy. And that's why they come to hotels, whether that's for business or for leisure. So we think we've adapted enough to be able to make sure that guests are safe, but they still have a great time with us. South Africa, you're right. We've got 11 hotels, fantastic hotels in South Africa. And those hotels, some of them rely heavily on the meetings and events business, but that has been one of the most impacted, and we think will be one of the slower segments to come back.
What is the picture in South Africa from reopening hotels? You've got 11 properties employing hundreds of people at these properties. I mean, crucial. The tourism industry is such a critical jobs provider in this country, and it will be the last sector to come back to work and to recover in any meaningful way at some point in the future. What are your plans?
Yeah. Well, we've made an individual plan per hotel, and we've worked very closely with the hotel owners and the teams in the hotel to make sure that first, our initial approach was that this isn't necessarily an economic crisis. It will become an economic crisis, but it's a humanitarian one, a safety and security one. So how do we protect our buildings? How do we protect our guests? How do we protect our teams and make sure that they're safe and secure? And then, of course, we move to protecting the commercial part of the business, which is making sure that the liquidity crisis that's being caused by the lack of business doesn't turn into a solvency crisis. So many cost-saving measures, very frequent interactions with banks, for example, and with owners to make sure that the businesses are as propped up as they possibly can be, and will be here for many years to come. In terms of opening, most of our hotels in South Africa are now open. We have 2 that aren't quite open yet, but should be soon. And they're doing varying levels of business, but certainly way less than we would normally expect at this time of year. We're hovering around a 25% occupancy on average. Some of those a little bit higher, some much lower. it really depends on the location and the availability of business that's been there for particularly key workers in South Africa.
You're not considering at this stage doing a Marriott. Marriott, of course, removed its banner from 3 iconic properties in South Africa just a couple of weeks ago. And we've seen that being picked up by local hotel groups. You're not looking at a divestment at this stage?
No, I mean, I can't comment on why Marriott did that, but for us, we've always been incredibly committed to Africa, and it remains part of our global organisation's footprint and a priority for growth. We see Africa as having enormous potential over the coming decade or so. So we're still looking for opportunities. We haven't slowed down our development pipeline. We haven't slowed down our activities in Africa or in South Africa. In fact, we signed a couple of hotels just before the pandemic hit, and we're still full force with those. And we expect to open at least 1 hotel in South Africa before the end of the year. So exciting times for us. And whilst this pandemic has had an incredibly, an immeasurable impact almost on 2020, when you build a hotel and when we partner with somebody who's built a hotel, this is a 20-year relationship. And over that time horizon, we hope to see the pandemic in our rearview mirror and much success for the future.
Tom Cordon, thank you very much for joining us. Senior Vice President for Middle East and Africa at the Radisson Hotel Group, joining us from Dubai this evening on Taking Stock. And finally this evening here on Taking Stock, Leanne back. Now, Leanne is a specialist in hospitality and tourism at BDO, and we've been hearing horror stories, Leanne, about the state of the tourism sector right now. Before we went into COVID, tourism felt like it was on not exactly a stratospheric trajectory, but was on a very decent growth path, a very substantial contributor to South Africa's jobs numbers, and also, of course, a big contributor in terms of GDP.
Yeah, so in terms of GDP, tourism accounted for roughly 8.6% of our country's GDP, and that's directly and indirectly. And as you're talking about jobs, 1.5 million jobs, directly and indirectly. Over 700,000 people directly employed in travel and tourism. As you mentioned, it hasn't been on any sort of major huge growth. In fact, the compound average growth rate from 2010 has been just over 3%. Nothing startling if you consider global growth averages around 4.5% to 5%. So we had some great years after 2010. Then we went to 2015, where we had all the visa issues, and we actually saw a huge decline in our foreign tourism numbers. And then we were slowly creeping back up again. Last year was not a great year, but in hindsight, it was a great year compared to this year. So
everything is relative to where you start.
Exactly. I was actually thinking the other day about what were the issues last year. I mean, they seem small compared to the issues this year that we're facing, but yeah.
I mean, we're a long-haul destination. We're difficult to get to. We're expensive to get to, and we're not exactly the cheapest place on earth where you can travel. We've got fabulous products, fabulous offerings, but we have massive structural problems within tourism in South Africa that don't allow for huge volumes of people to make their way to come and visit us. And so many of the problems in recent years have been self-inflicted problems, whether that be from the visa issue, whether from day zero narrative in Cape Town, which helped damage the 2018 tourist year, the year after the drought. And now we've got COVID-19, and tourism has come to this awful sudden stop, as our other guests have been telling us tonight.
An absolute stop. So, I mean, if you think about 10.2 million foreign visitors last year, and so we had just over 2 million visitors for the first 3 months of this year. That's it. And that's, at this stage, that's all we're going to get, because we do not know when our borders are going to open. So we don't know what the rest of the year is going to look like. I mean, can you imagine you have to ride out the year on 2 million visitors? It's horrific. And it's horrific for the people that work in the sector. It's horrific for the other industries that are reliant on tourism. If you think about it, 8% of retail is actually due to tourism, whether it's you and I going to buy our bucket and spade to go to the beach, or whether it's foreign tourists spending on food and curios. So the tentacles for tourism are far-reaching through many sectors, through the automotive sector, manufacturing, the laundry. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And of course, the catering, and the agriculture and the farming that extends to that as well. So we're not providing food for the tourists that would be here. It's devastating, and we need surety, because in reality, the 1.5 million jobs that are created by the sector, a lot of them are unskilled jobs or semi-skilled jobs. And they are widely dispersed jobs. They're not concentrated necessarily in city centres. They're dispersed around the country. These are the jobs we need. And so we need to look at how do we resurrect tourism as safely as possible, but as soon as possible as well. The advantages are, I mean, you're talking about the fact that there are all these obstacles to getting to South Africa. But we've got a huge advantage, and that's our open space. And that is the new luxury. The new luxury is open spaces. It's not five-star hotels anymore, because all the frills that were in the five-star hotels are not going to be there, because that's just adding touch points and reducing safety levels. But we can provide, we don't have Venice with all these overcrowded places that people want to flock to. We've got the places people want to go to now, which is getting away from other people. We offer the most beautiful scenery. And another advantage is that we're actually seeing that South Africa is on top of the search engine lists, where people are looking internationally as to where do they want to go to. So this is a huge positive for us.
One of the reasons why it was such a crime that we kept chasing people away and making it blooming difficult to get here. But that's the history we need to look forward. We see globally the tentative beginnings, these corridors that we talk about across Europe, for example, between countries that are deemed to be safe with one another. Then destinations will open and they close quickly, and pubs will open and close when there's a COVID case. I'm guessing that this is, as South Africa begins to open up, and hopefully sooner rather than later, there's going to have to be this extraordinary flexibility in the travel and tourism sector in order to allow them to get to some kind of level of business. Absolutely.
So one of the key areas that we're going to have to be very flexible is on our cancellation policies. And booking policy. So it allows people to, I desperately want to go to South Africa, but I don't want to lose my money if all of a sudden the country's got to be closed down, or the area that I want to go to is going to be closed down, and that safe corridor is no longer available to me. So we have to be flexible on that. We also have to look at the pricing as well, because competition is going to be tough. Although we're saying South Africa's got a lot of positives, a lot of other countries are marketing themselves. They're seeing the opportunity too, and they're also desperate to get their travel and tourism going. I mean, this bloodbath is not restricted to South Africa. It's a global bloodbath. So the competition is huge, and we need to be flexible to be able to adapt and to allow tourists to actually come here and make it as easy as possible for them. And, we really should be learning from our past mistakes.
We should be. We should be. Tell me about the future of long-distance air travel. I mean, there are aeroplanes parked in deserts and in aeroplane car parks all over the world, aching, I'm sure, to get back into the skies. But the economics of long-distance travel, the economics of tourism into the future, I feel like they're going to shift quite significantly as we enter this fray of cut-price holidays, as people try to open up again and try to get volumes in. It's going to be a huge fight. I mean, I wonder whether we get back to our tourism levels in the next 5 years.
I don't know when we're going to get back to anywhere back to what I would call normal levels of tourism. Yeah, IATA are predicting, they're seeing demand for international revenue per kilometer has dropped 54% this year. They're expecting a 30% drop in 2021 over 2019 numbers. So they're also not expecting any sort of rapid recovery. And so yes, this is definitely going to have an implication. And obviously the fact that we're a long-haul destination doesn't add to it. It's going to make flights to South Africa even more expensive. But I do believe there's opportunities to start catering towards a wider domestic market. So we've had a very narrow view on the domestic market. And there's opportunities to adapt existing products so that we cater more to a broader sphere of South Africans and regional people. So talking about tourists, visitors from our neighboring countries, not bringing them here just as shoppers, but bringing them here as leisure tourists who actually participate in our tourism value chain.
I mean, it's going to take a huge effort by the industry to make itself more attractive. It's going to take a huge effort by SA Tourism and by the Department of Tourism, which has not covered itself in glory through this period of COVID-19, to put South Africa on the map in a way that has never been done before. Aspirational, exciting, opportunity, all of these things that exist in South Africa's tourism sector that so desperately need to be well showcased to bring visitors back at some point. What's your best guess?
I just wanted to say that we've just, the tourism sector, the public sector has just had R1 billion cut off its budget. So we just had That's massive. When you're only getting 2.6 billion and you just had lost $1 billion of it. So that means there's limited money for marketing. And I see this as a major, major shortfall and shortcoming in terms of our government's view. It means we have to rely on the private sector to market the country, and private sector's been ravaged. I mean, they've got no cash left. They've been trying to keep their businesses afloat. So we're going to have to think, this is where we're going to have to be really creative in terms of how do we market, how do we get our name out there on a shoestring budget, with no budget at all, and with heightened competition. And social media obviously is going to have to come to the fore. Technology is going to have to come to the fore, and we're going to have to pool all our resources together and all the minds together to actually make this happen. It's a big mountain to climb, but we can do it. We can make it happen.
We have lots of mountains. That's one of the attractions of South Africa. Leanne Back, thank you very much indeed. Leanne is a specialist in hospitality and in tourism, and she works at BDO. My thanks to my guests this evening, to Leanne Back at BDO, also to Tim Cordon at the Radisson Hotel Group, and to Elmar Conradie, the Chief Executive of FlySafair. A horrible prognosis for the tourism and hospitality sectors. Kenya is beginning to look to open up. It's our big competitor on this African continent. South Africa needs to find ways to make it happen here for the sake of jobs, the economy, and an industry that is globally sought after. Till next time, good night.